According to Friday, August 1st, spoilers for the bold and the beautiful Brooke Logan's accident is imminent. Since Nick Marone's marriage proposal is going to fail, let's discuss their sad journey. Brooke is prepared to accept the new direction that Nick is providing now that she has accepted his hand. Brooke is captivated to Nick and his commitment because she is sick of Ridge Forrester denying their fate. Nick will soon be treating Brooke to a romantic dinner on a boat, and he intends to make a lavish show of love to end it all. Nick hopes Brooke will accept his proposal of marriage again because he has an engagement ring for her. Ridge will then experience a range of emotions in Friday's B&B episode, including anguish, rage, jealousy, and more. Ridge will continue to be in Brooke's heart, but we'll watch him pout and rage as Nick receives all of her attention. Naturally, Nick and Brooke's amorous encounter will not go as planned. Because Brooke is going to have an accident, things are going to go horribly wrong. Brooke appears to be preparing for a scenario in which she falls into the sea and needs to be rescued. Ridge should be watching from a distance when he sees Brooke fall, because he will ultimately realize that she is in trouble. Eric Forrester will hope for a reunion between Brooke and Ridge while Ridge prepares to save Brooke. Eric will still rely on fate to reunite Ridge and Brooke, even though Nick has been disobeying his repeated warnings. Eric has some good news coming his way because of the impending accident in Italy and Ridge's ultimate decision to realize who his true love is. Keep checking back for updates on the next stage of Brooke and Ridge's romance, because they still have a future together. According to spoilers for The Bold and the Beautiful, Ridge and Brooke's fate will resurface in the upcoming episodes, meaning Taylor Hayes will suffer a terrible blow. Friday, August 1st, 2025. Spoilers for The Bold and the Beautiful are available. Nick Marone's proposal on a boat is something fans can anticipate. But Ridge Forrester could try a risky rescue when Brooke Logan fell into the sea. Let's discuss what will happen in the upcoming episode of the CBS soap opera, as you continue reading. The Fury of Eric Forrester. First, let's talk about Eric Forrester, who got into a heated argument with Nick during the fashion presentation. Ridge's challenger was cautioned by the patriarch to avoid Brooke. The seaman, however, has never been one to follow directions. Brooke, meanwhile, ultimately came to the conclusion that she could no longer do this with Ridge. She simply can't stand her heart's never-ending roller coaster anymore. He sought to hang on rather than let Brooke leave in peace. See what transpired in the most recent B&B episode by reading this. The Fall of Brooke Logan. Brooke didn't turn around when she eventually left Ridge. Not once. Every time Brooke leaves Ridge, she turns around. She may therefore really be over him and prepared for her journey with Nick. Unfortunately, it appears that Nick's plan to buy a boat will not work out. Somehow Brooke tumbles into the sea. I wonder whether Nick stuns Brooke rather than surprises her. Therefore it's his fault that she almost drowns. The rescue operation of Ridge Forrester. Ridge appears to be there to save the day when Brooke falls off the boat. In the past, rescuing compulsions forced Ridge to reunite in soap operas. But I'm hoping that after thanking him, Brooke will agree to Nick's suggestion. Fans would finally applaud. That would be soap opera gold. We might be lucky with a last-minute swerve, but it's unlikely. August 1st, 2025. Friday. Sheila Carter-Sharp may attempt to locate Lee Finnegan back in Los Angeles. Following the excellent doctor shouldn't be too difficult because the waitress is an expert at stalking. Deacon Sharp is attempting to help Sheila deal with her loss in the interim. Nevertheless, Deacon 2 requires a confidant to discuss his emotions, which differ greatly from Sheila's. Given that it's Friday, is it possible for Luna Nozawa to awaken as well? Will she remember anything that happened? Will Luna have a different personality when she wakes up? Will she attempt to deceive Lee into believing that she has changed? Stay tuned, as this might go in many different directions. On Friday, August 1st, 2025, which storyline are you most excited to see? For months, Nick had been preparing the proposal. Each and every element had been thought through, edited, and refined. Everything had been planned, including the fireworks timing and the exclusive garden reservation. With Brooke's sister's assistance, he had selected the ring, saved more money than he could afford, and even rehearsed his speech in front of the mirror until it seemed natural. Nick was excited but nervous, certain that the evening would go as smoothly as a dream. Brooke didn't know. As they had done many times before, she assumed they were simply heading out for a late summer meal and a stroll through the botanical gardens. When Nick handed her the menu, she saw that his hand trembled a little. but she assumed that was just his typical unease in upscale settings. She didn't start to notice anything strange until they were approaching the remote rose pavilion. The air was warm with the aroma of blooms, the sky was a rich purple, and the garden was almost deserted. Classical music, but so faint it seemed accidental, drifted through the bushes. Following Nick, who moved a bit too quickly and looked over his shoulder with an anxious smile, Brooke's heels clicked on the stone walkway. She thought of how adorable he looked when he was upset and grinned while sweeping a lock of hair away from her face. Nick guided her to a circle of rose bushes, where an old oak tree provided shade for a little platform. Above them, fairy lights were strung, softly glimmering in the gloom. Realizing that this was a private occasion that had been planned specifically for them, Brooke blinked. Nick pulled something out of his pocket and turned to face her as her heartbeat quickened. "Brooke," he said in a tremulous but earnest voice, "I knew, from the first time I met you." However, he did not complete the statement. In the instant that followed, there was a shout and a harsh crack coming from the route behind them. Brooke whirled. A biker lost control and was heading directly at them after riding too quickly along a tight curve. Bicycles were not supposed to use the garden walk, and the surface was slippery due to damp leaves from a previous rain. The rider went sideways while attempting to brake. There was not even time for Brooke to move. She was brutally thrown to the ground by the hit, which knocked the air out of her lungs. Something white-hot burned through her shoulder, the world swung sideways and her ears rang. She tried to sit up after gasping, but the pain kept her anchored to the floor. With the ring box left on the floor next to him, Nick was rushing to her side while yelling her name. Nick didn't care that the biker was lying moaning a few feet away after colliding with a bench. He could only make out Brooke's pale face and the strange way her arm was bent at her side. Where her elbow had scraped the gravel, blood gathered beneath it. Panicked, his heart pounding, he touched her cheek. "Brooke? Can you hear me, baby?" Her breath was ragged as she blinked. I believe I may have broken something." With shaking fingers, Nick reached for his phone and dialed emergency services. Holding her unhurt hand and whispering comforting words, he watched the distant red and blue lights come closer, trying to keep her conscious. He was scared, angry, and powerless. It had become a nightmare instead of the ideal time. Brooke was diagnosed with a slight concussion and a fractured collarbone at the hospital. For observation, they kept her overnight. Nick never left the uncomfortable plastic chair next to her bed, and he remained by her side the whole time. He kept the ring box in his jacket pocket, unopened and out of his reach for the time being. Once he committed his proposal speech to memory, it evaporated like steam in his head. The following morning, Brooke was released with his spirit disturbed, head bandaged and arm in a sling. She made a joke about how Nick's great surprise had undoubtedly made the evening unforgettable, in an attempt to make light of the catastrophe. However, her eyes flickered with uneasiness, and her grin was tight. The soreness in her body was lessened by the medications, but the underlying discomfort remained unabated. Nick put the blame on himself. He mentally reenacted the situation 100 times, questioning whether he could have pushed her aside more quickly, whether he ought to have chosen a different spot, and whether any of it could have been avoided. However, no amount of hypothetical scenarios could reverse the harm. As Brooke recovered, he helped her get dressed, prepared her meals, and even washed her hair when she was unable to raise her arm. He was patient and kind, yet there was a change in their relationship. In the weeks that followed, Brooke became more reserved. Her smile diminished. She had to work hard to chuckle. At first, Nick tried to ignore it, blaming it on the discomfort or annoyance of being hurt. But he had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. She finally said the words he had been dreading one night when they were lying in bed, her cast arm resting uneasily on a pillow. "I believe the accident altered my perspective in some way." The weight of her statement hit Nick like a stone as he turned to face her. Even if he understood, he said, "I don't know what you mean." Struggling to find the proper words, Brooke paused. "It got me to thinking about everything. About what's important in life. The speed with which things can go wrong. And I came to the realization that I'm not sure if I'm prepared for forever." The ensuing hush was deafening. Drying his throat, Nick swallowed. "You're referring to us?" Quietly, she said. "I'm talking about getting married. About whether I've been following what I believed I should want, or if that's what I truly want." With a racing heart, Nick sat up. However, we have previously discussed it. You stated. I understand. I believed I was certain. However, while I lay there on the sidewalk, feeling as though everything had suddenly fallen apart, I came to understand how unpredictable everything is. And perhaps I'm not prepared to accept such a significant offer. The corners of her eyes pricked with tears, but she forced them to stay. The ground seemed to have been torn out from under Nick. He had been so confident of their love, so sure. Now, however, he had no certainty. He didn't make another proposal. No, not that week. Not in that particular month. They wandered instead. Although Brooke's physical condition improved, her emotional distance persisted. She went back to work and went about her daily activities, but the intimacy they had felt was diminished. Nick made an effort to listen to her without trying to repair anything, to be patient and to give her space. However, the pain in his chest persisted. One evening, following a peaceful meal, Brooke turned to face him across the table, her eyes welling with tears. I believe we need a vacation. The words came to him more slowly, but no less painfully, like a second accident. Unconfident in his ability to talk, he nodded. They decided she would spend some time with her sister. The following morning she packed a bag, gave him a cheek kiss and left. Hours later, Nick sat on the couch with the unopened engagement ring on the coffee table still in its box. The flowers, the fireworks, the garden proposal, all of it had turned sour. He had no idea if they would return from this. Weeks went by. Occasionally, they sent a courteous but aloof text. Brooke visited a counselor. Nick got lost in his job. On other evenings, he took out the ring box and gazed at it, contemplating whether to sell it, return it, or simply throw it into the river. However, a part of him continued to hope that they simply paused, not lost with what they had. Perhaps the event had jolted them both into a clearer perspective. Months later, Brooke knocked on his home one afternoon. Her arm recovered. Despite the fatigue in her eyes, her expression was gentler. I still love you, she remarked as she entered silently and took a seat across from him. However, I need us to start over. Not wearing a ring. Not with a pledge. Just to be honest. Nick took a seat next to her. He refused to hold her hand. Not quite yet. He merely gave a nod. Hours passed while they conversed. Concerning the mishap, anxiety, anticipations and affection. Tears, apologies, confessions and laughter were all present. No fireworks. Not a fairy light. Sitting in a quiet apartment, two people are attempting to piece together something tangible. In the drawer the ring remained. For the time being.